Hi, welcome to another edition of Back to Basics. This is Paulie Joan from Writer's World, and today we're going to talk about planning and pantsing. So today we're going to talk about planning and pantsing, and also something called plantsing, which is in the middle. So we're going to go through three different things. We're going to cover three topics. We're going to talk about what is planning, we're going to look at what is pantsing, and then finally what is plantsing. So you'll have a better concept of these three things. Now, these back to basic videos, I always end with plan to pants. So I trust that by sharing this with you, it's going to make a little bit more sense. So let's get straight into it. Let's start with what is planning. You might be able to guess that planning is all about planning out your book and planning out your structure. And be aware that these terminologies I'm talking about are appropriate to both fiction and non-fiction. It's usually used in the fiction world, but as I'm going to describe it to you, I'm sure that you'll see that it actually fits really well in both. So what is planning? It's all about structure. It's about planning out the aspects of your book and what's going to happen. So for example, with fiction, it would be planning out the plot. It is also sometimes called plotting, so plotting. It's planning out perhaps you're using the 3-act structure, so it's planning out your book based on that. It's planning out your book based on the hero's journey, which can be used in non-fiction as well, particularly if you're doing narrative non-fiction. So it's planning out the beats, and if you're a part of the Right Now program, you might be familiar with the beat sheet. So that is part of the planning process. It's planning out what is going to happen in each chapter. It's not writing it yet, it's creating an outline and creating a point-by-point plan of what's going to happen. So what do planners do? People that are called planners, they plan. So they plan out their book to a T. And the thing is, why people would be called planners over pantsers is that they don't leave anything to chance. They don't start writing anything until everything's planned. And I'm talking about planning out the characters, planning out the world. So it's not just planning out the parts of the book and the structure of the book, it's planning out all the components. So if you're doing non-fiction, it would be planning out all of your research, planning out, any interviews, be planning out exactly what you're going to put in, your images, everything. It'd be planning absolutely as much as possible without actually writing the book. So the perils of being a planner is that you can be planning for a very long time without actually taking that step into the creative process. You can spend so much time on planning that you never dive into the next step. So there's people out there that have been writing their books for years, and it could be because they're a planner, where they're stuck in the planning, they're building the world, they're building characters for non-fiction, they're doing the research, they're gathering the data, but they haven't yet sat down to write because they're really good at planning, they just don't know how to move it over into the next part. So that's one of the main perils of planning, is getting stuck in planning and not actually taking the next step to the writing component. So that is a really nice segue to talk about what is pantsing. So pantsing, if you haven't heard this term before, it's named from basically flying by the seat of your pants, or writing by the seat of your pants. So it's writing with no concept of where you're going. There is no plan. It's just sitting down and completely trusting intuition and completely just free writing. And oh my gosh, it has so many powerful qualities around it. I'm going to speak to you about the perils in a moment, but let's first of all look at a little bit more about what pantsing is. It is writing without any concept of, for fiction, the plot. No concept of the acts, no concept of the hero's journey. It's literally just writing. And I did my first book this way. This is why the thing was a monstrosity, and to this day I'm kind of like, Yeah, don't read it. I love it, and I've done work and I've reworked it a bit into a series, but the initial book was a monstrosity in a lot of ways. And the reason is because I completely pantsed it. I didn't know where it was going. I didn't know how the story was going to play out. I didn't know where the point that I needed to get to. I didn't know the plot points, none of it. I was completely pantsing. Now, the advantages of pantsing is that you're not in the way. You're just like completely in flow, which is fantastic. And this is what pantsers do. They trust their intuition and their characters so much that they're not even involved. It's like, and it's an amazing experience. It's literally like it's coming from somewhere else. And as you're writing as a pantser, you're often going, wait, what? No. and you've probably seen me post on the Patreon page where this has happened, where it's kind of like, no, wait, I didn't want that to happen, but it's gone and happened because that's where the characters have taken it. Now, the biggest peril with pantsing is kind of the opposite of planning. So planning, there's so much planning that they never get into the writing process and that component, whereas pantsing's the opposite. There's so much writing that there's nowhere to go, and so there's no start, there's no end. They don't know when to finish it, and this is why my first book was a monstrosity. It was 165,000 words simply because I had no direction and I had no end. And the first third of that book is really slow because I was getting into the groove of it. Planners don't need to get into the groove of it. Pantsers quite often do, and it can show in the writing and what they produce. Now, just looking at pantsing from a non-fiction perspective, that would be like believing that you know everything and so you don't need to plan. Pantsing in non-fiction would be like going, I know this stuff so well, I can just jump on camera and say anything and it'll be fine and people will follow me. And you know what, that could be true on a smaller scale, but when it comes to writing a book, it's the same thing. You're going to get lost. You're not going to have anywhere to stop. And here's the thing about writing a book, it's a journey. In the process of writing a book, you learn so much about yourself. And so this is what I see with people that are non-fiction and trying to pants non-fiction. Their journey happens faster than the book. So they're learning more things. And then they make this mistake of thinking, wow, I've learned this new thing. I now need to put that in my book. But if they planned, then they would know, no, that doesn't need to go in this book. But if you're pantsing, it's like, oh, I've got to put that in. Oh, now I've just had this enlightenment and I need to put this in. And it gets a little ridiculous. So let's get on to the next part, because this is where the gold is, and that is plantsing. So as you can probably guess, plantsing is a combination of planning and pantsing. So it is both elements together. So this is why I say that it's the sweet spot, it's the gold, because it is doing both of these things and taking the strengths of both of these things while avoiding the perils of both of these things. So it avoids the perils of planning, it avoids the perils of pantsing by doing them together. Go with me. So here's what plantsers do. I'm a plantser. This is what I do. Plantsers plan an outline. They plan an idea. They'll have a thought, and it might not be a complete thought, and they'll put it over here and be okay with where it's at. They won't need to plan it out in its entirety before they get to the writing. So a plantser will have a general idea, an overview of the book. Now, I'm a plantser in both fiction and non-fiction because it's the easiest way, because the planning gives you a structure, whereas the pantsing allows you to bring through your passion, your creativity, your characters, and your greatest truth. So plantsers plan an outline, and then they go in and fill in the outline by going, for example, okay, so I might have a chapter and it says, this is what happens in this chapter. That's it, one line. And then I will create that story and I will pants that part. So it's doing an overall plan and then pantsing each part within it. So the advantages that you get from planting is flexibility and journey. So it means that you can have that journey and that growth, but because you've got the plan, you can go, wait, does this need to go in now? Or my audience maybe not ready for that part, so we can go into another book later. And hello, all of a sudden you've got another book, right? So the advantages of it are planners are very strict. This is what it is. There is no going outside of it. Pantsers are very loose. They don't know what's going on. A planter has a plan, but has the flexibility to go, oh, there's a little side road. I'm going to take this and see what happens, and then I'm going to come back into the plan. So that is why planting is a sweet spot. It's where you want to be. And we're going to do actually some more videos on this, because it is so important and really good to understand the structure of it and why planning and pantsing going together is really what you should be aiming to do. So these are the three things that I want you to take away from today. Firstly, planning is structure. It's an outline. That's it. It's an outline. Pantsing is completely winging it. And planting is in between. So planting is the best of both worlds without the perils. So however you choose to approach your work, just know the perils, know the pitfalls. Know that if you're going to plan, at some point you need to step out of that and start writing. Know if you're going to pants, at some point you're probably going to go, where's this going? I had a lot of those times when I was writing my first book. But if you're planting, then you are planning with the flexibility to allow intuition to take you where you need to go. Planning's all head, pantsing's all heart, planting's using both. So I trust that when I say at the end, plan to pants, it kind of makes a little bit more sense now. So thank you for joining us today. This has been Paulie Joan of Writer's World. And remember, until next time, plan to pants.